Once again, we want to welcome you to In the Now with Jim Swilley. This is part 3 of The Mind of Christ and Living the Intentional Life with our special guest, John Scott, coming to you live from Metron in Midtown Atlanta. Would you please welcome our friend John with us again today? Those of you that are watching on the YouTube channel, you might want to also check out the music that he did here today, and his new EP is available, and it's amazing. And when we're talking about the intentional life today, we're talking about the power of intention and living your life as God has, whatever and whoever God is to you, something divine that you have in you has given you creative ability. And we still use that terminology. I don't make any apology for saying God, or even refer, sometimes he's gender specific. I refer to God. I don't know if you've seen The Shack, but we watched it last week, and I thought it was, because I hadn't read the book, I thought it was cool that God is female in it, but at a certain point, God comes to the main character in male form. He says, you're going to need a father for what we're going to do today. And I thought that's an interesting concept, that there are things that are possibly gender specific, and that God can be all of those things. We've discussed God is as female as he, she is male. And if you have a problem with that, you really need some counseling, because you've mentioned in the previous 2 installments, you mentioned about gender roles being challenged, and racism is certainly an issue, but misogyny and sexism is a huge thing that has finally come to the surface and is having to be dealt with. You know, like what really are the proper roles for people, and you say, well, it's disorienting. Let me tell you, it's better than it used to be. I mean, things are better than they used to be. You may think they're not, but they are. And I do believe it's important to keep your finger on the pulse of what's happening in the world, but also keep a bigger picture, a bigger vision. John Lennon said, you may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. And I believe there are dreamers all over the world that may have different terminology of things, but we're all seeing a better world. You were in between tapings, you were talking about something. Go back to what you were saying there about whatever you were saying. Say that again.
The way my brain works, I'm trying to think of what that was, because in disorientation, we feel consumed by doubt. And we've often been taught that doubt is the opposite of faith. But I don't believe that doubt is the opposite of faith. I believe that doubt is a part of the recipe of faith. Because doubting what is in place in front of you now allows you to open up to whatever the new is. So if you're doubting your doctrines and you're doubting theology and you're doubting the system, it's because you're following Spirit. That seems completely opposite of what we've been taught, because we've been invited into a club where they offer certainty. If you walk down this aisle, you pray this prayer, you get your fire insurance card, and you get to go to heaven.
Well, we were talking about specifically the idea that there's no such thing as a sunrise and a sunset.
Right.
And that the Catholic Church actually wanted to have Copernicus put to death because they said it was a heresy that he was preaching. They wanted to martyr Galileo because Galileo came along and confirmed the things that Copernicus said. If you don't know what I'm talking about, the ancients believed that the earth was the center of the universe and that everything was revolving around the earth. Well, now we know, I mean, even the most traditional conservative Christian school is not going to preach that.
Right.
They just found, a few weeks ago, they found 7 inhabitable planets that are light years away from our solar system that they never even knew existed before. So we're constantly realizing that we're just even in the edge of our understanding of the universe. But we still call it sunset, and we still call it sunrise, and it's still beautiful. There's something about watching it, but it's a matter of perception. And we said it a minute ago, you had said it's not that the light is coming into us, it's that we're turning toward the light.
Yes.
So we still, I don't know if we'll ever stop saying sunrise. What time is sunrise tomorrow? But it's really, what time is your corner of the earth going to move to place where it's facing the sun? but it feels like sunrise.
Yeah.
And maybe that's symbolic for what we're going through right now. This is who God has always been.
Yeah.
And this, I felt it today when you read, when you sang, "Your love never fails, never gives up on me." There's nearly a chant-like part of that song that's very affirming. The idea of, I am loved, and the love never gives up, and that's important to me because I was raised with a God that I wasn't totally sure loved me. I got the idea that I was more, endured. And the idea was, well, you may make it to heaven, but if you do, you better keep a low profile because we all know you're not supposed to be there, and our righteousness is as filthy rags. But when you start reading between the lines, even Paul would say things like, well, you're righteous because you believe you're righteous. With the heart man believes unto righteousness. That's a very humanistic idea. It's like, well, I'm going to heaven because I believe I'm going to heaven.
Yeah.
I believe things will work out in my life because I believe they're going to work out.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really what faith is. And I can tell you this, you don't have to spend a lot of time in prayer and fasting to get that. It really is just an intention. It's, this is the way I'm going to think about my life. And I'm not going to argue with you if you need something different. But I've visited several people in the hospital lately that I didn't really pray a prayer over them. I just said, this is what I believe is going to happen. I believe the procedure is going to go well. And a lot of people are sending a lot of good prayers and energy to you. And I just left it at that. And they did get results from it. Mm-hmm. What do you think about that while I cough and drink more water?
Well, that it's interesting how that leads us down the trail of what prayer really is, and I asked this question on Facebook the other day and got a myriad of answers. I said, does prayer change things or does prayer change people and people change things? Like, which is it? And it could be both and when people answer both, I respond with, cool. When people answer, well, I believe it changes people and people change things. Cool. Because, again, it's allowing us to understand that this thing we've called spirit and this divine nature, it's never something that we ever kind of grasp. It's more of something that grasps us, right? Does that make sense? Like we've been grasping at something that we should just allow to grasp us. Even Lao Tzu in the writing of the Tao Te Ching said that we do too much. He said, do less and watch more get done. Because he was talking about being so busy. I'm in the process of putting a book together called The Law of Subtraction. And we've had the law of attraction, and we've talked about prosperity, and I'm dealing with the subject, and my wife would say, don't say this out loud, because if you do, then you won't be motivated to do it. But I feel like I need to say this to us. This is about allowing things to be taken away so that we can see the varnish. This is where the idea comes from. My mother had some antiques that were passed down to her when her mother passed away, and they were just this ugly paint job on them, just terrible, but they were hard wood. And she decided that she didn't want the furniture. And then somebody came up with the bright idea, we'll strip the varnish off of it and see if you like it. And when you got it down to its original, right? When you got it to where you could see the grain, it was like, oh, this is completely beautiful. And what the idea of this book is, we have been covered up with so much varnish from religion, whatever the religion is, not just Christianity, but we've been covered up with so much varnish that we've missed the grain of how things are. So it's subtracting and unplugging and not needing to be certain and all of those kinds of things. One of the things that you mentioned about Paul, because Paul actually was a mystic, and even though, I have arguments with Paul, and I actually do, sometimes out loud in my car. One of the things that led me to having the need or losing the need to label was Colossians 3:11, where Paul kind of painstakingly describes that Christ is all and in all. Let me tell you who all Christ is. In other words, he was saying all means all, so that it helped me to do this. I watched my own life. It was a weird sort of almost out-of-body experience. Not really. But what happened is that I felt like I elevated up above these labels and went, oh, now I can see the labels for what they are, not make judgment of them, because Christ, the presence, has always been over and above what we come up with to try to codify it so that we can cope with it. So that's why we as humans, we have to call it God, and we have to call God he or she, or put these labels, because we're trying to cope and we're simply trying to communicate. That's why I don't judge it. I don't judge it. I don't need to judge theology about it anymore. Now, other people who come in with a judgmental, I'm going to fight with you about it, I will just relieve myself of that because I don't need to be in that conflict. But if we want to talk about this thing, that's why, like Peter Rollins says this, and I agree. He says, and he says it in his Irish accent, he says, I don't know that we talk about God. He said, I think we talk about theology, or we talk about talking about God, because I don't know that God's can be explained as much as experienced. And that's kind of what, that's where I'm at. I'm telling you, it's so peaceful. I'm inviting you. The water is just fine. It really is a nice place to be because the war's over. You don't have to argue anymore. Then your being is filled with light because you're not dualistic in your thinking. This is, if it's okay, I'd just like to go here a second. Third way thinking invites us out of the city to Golgotha, where Jesus is hung between two thieves. Dual thinking. Thieves, they steal.
On the place of the skull.
The crosses are in the place of the skull, penetrating the dome of thought. And Jesus is, and we're not invited. See, universalism, Christianity has two levels of universalism. First, Jesus died for everybody. This message is for everyone. If you pray the prayer, you get in. The other one is Jesus died for everybody and everybody's saved no matter what. You don't have to pray the prayer. Another way to look at it is nobody needs to be in. We all are invited out. The veil is rent in two from top to bottom to show you it's a sham. That there's nothing in there. There's nothing behind the veil. We talk about going behind the veil. We're invited out of the veil. This is the opportunity to see this thing's bankrupt.
That was the best part. It took us three parts to get there, but that was it. If you're watching this on YouTube, watch part 1 and part 2. But that was the best part. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
It's another way. It's a counter narrative. It's not arguing with the narrative that's in place. It's giving another story. See, if Martin Luther King Jr. had have said segregation is bad, stop treating us this way, y'all are ticking me off, nothing would have changed. But he came up with a different story, a counter-narrative, I have a dream. And that changed things. Because we can stand and protest each other. We can have both sides fighting with each other. But until we get to the balance that's in between that holds both intention with grace intentionally, I don't know that we ever shifting our consciousness. And Jesus and the thieves are crucified right next to hell, Gehenna, outside of the city.
And there's even, this may be what you're saying in other words, there's even a deeper understanding of universalism, and that is, if I never thought I was fallen to begin with, I don't need any of it anyway. Yeah. God says to Adam, well, who told you were naked? In other words, this is your perception, but because you believe you're naked, then I'll have to treat you that way.
Yes.
But what if there's the deeper level is even, I never even thought I was naked. That was always the problem with when Christian missionaries would go to try to convert Buddhists.
Right.
Because they would say, God can live inside of you. And they're like,
we know.
Right, we know he does.
We know. He's been here for a long time.
You know, if you don't have the Abrahamic religion idea of I'm separated,
yes,
then you don't, there's no gate there.
Folks,
you know?
do you hear the key? Do you hear the key unlocking the door? Do you hear that? Right? That's it. That's understanding that we don't come from a place of original sin. We come from a place of original blessing. See, original sin is a Christian problem, not a Jewish problem. When you ask Jewish people about original sin, they ask you what you're talking about.
And that's no disrespect to the cross.
No.
I mean, if anything, it makes me appreciate that Jesus did that more than ever, because it wasn't necessary from God's viewpoint. He was identifying with man's paradigm.
Yeah, if God needed to kill your older brother so that he could deal with looking at you, his younger sibling, then your God is sadistic. And listen, let me say this with all the kindness that I can say it with. That is manipulation because it's good for business. People give more when they're afraid. This is why more than ever, when we're moving into these truths as a community, we need to surround around it. We need to support it, not with just our time, but with our finances. That's not manipulation, but it's because people are not, when you get disoriented, you want to leave. You want to get away. And we need to come back together. not to reorient to the same idea, but to be together in community, because community still matters, no matter whether there's an argument or not. Community still matters. But when we're talking about a third way of thinking, how many of you have heard the phrase, there's two sides to a coin? Anybody have a coin? Anybody have a coin? I may have one. Hold on a second. I'm taking up maybe more time than I don't have a coin. This just hit me, and it, perfect. All right. So, two sides to a coin. Watch. Okay, it's hard to see this coin, but it's flat. It's flat. You can reach the edge and fall off if you were small enough to walk on it. But if you turn it that way, you go in a circle. It's third way of thinking. It's moving out of the need.
That's real good, John. That's real good. That actually kind of gave me chills. That was good.
It's just, we live on a sphere. We're called to third way thinking. The only walls that are built are when people choose to build walls. And we only build walls to keep people out. We never build walls to protect ourselves. That's a lie. To protect ourselves is a lie. We build walls to keep people out or to keep fear out. We don't believe that God is all powerful. We prove it by how many walls we build.
Wow.
And how we insulate ourselves. And how we insulate ourselves.
Well, I think it goes without saying, we have much more to say, so you're going to have to come back for part 72. It's always excellent when you come. You always bring a special energy with you, and you certainly did not disappoint today. Would you once again tell our friend John Scott how much we appreciate him? Always so glad when you're here. Always. You're a good man, and we love you, and we need you. And go back, if you haven't seen parts 1 and part 2 of this, go back and see the scripture that we use out of Job and all of that, and make sure you check out all of our other stuff. Come see us at Midtown. We're here every Sunday at 11 a.m. Thank you so much for being with us on In the Now with Jim Swilley. Love you. We'll see you next time. Tell everybody we appreciate it, and thank you.
How are you feeling?